They tell you to be strong, but vulnerable. They want your emotions, but only the right ones, in the right amount. This impossible trap isn't just making you tired. It's destroying your ability to connect with yourself and others. By the end of this video, you'll discover how to break free from this emotional prison and reclaim the ancient male wisdom that resolves this contradiction completely. You'll learn one practice that will instantly free you from constant emotional performance and reconnect you to your authentic power. This isn't about finding balance. It's about reclaiming ownership that will transform every relationship in your life, starting today. "Are you okay?" they ask. Your hands get tight around the steering wheel. Your knuckles turn white. The pressure builds behind your eyes, and you push it down. Again. "I'm fine," you say back, keeping your voice steady and calm. But you're not fine. You haven't been fine for longer than you can remember. Yet showing that feels like stepping off a cliff when you don't know how far you'll fall. They tell you to open up. They say they want to see what's inside. But you've watched what happens to men who actually do this. You've seen how people pull back slightly. You've heard the awkward silence. You've noticed the whispered judgments that follow. You've seen men who showed too much emotion be called unstable. You've watched the price paid by those who dared to drop their guard. Your honesty gets used against you. So you live in this impossible space, caught between people telling you to take down your walls while also punishing you for having nothing to hide behind. Be vulnerable, the world says, but only in the ways we like. Express yourself, they push, but not so much that it makes anyone uncomfortable. Be human, they beg. But never forget that your strength is the only thing you're allowed to trade with. They want your deep feelings, but only the parts that don't upset their shallow ones. This is the trap modern men face, a mental squeeze coming from both sides. The old rules say, swallow your pain, while the new rules demand you show it. But only in small, clean portions that don't upset anyone. Take a breath. Feel how heavy that impossible choice is in your body right now. What if I told you this trap isn't just making you tired? It's breaking an entire generation of men. What if this impossible standard isn't just your private burden, but a shared wound that no one has properly named? And what if the answer isn't about choosing either stoicism or showing feelings, but about something much older and more powerful that most men have forgotten how to reach? Look at the damage this trap leaves behind. The divorced dad who didn't talk enough, but was also told his feelings were too intense when he finally shared them. The young worker praised for staying calm during crisis, but passed over for leadership because he doesn't connect with the team emotionally. The partner who stays quiet during fights because he's learned that his anger is always toxic, but his sadness is manipulative. You didn't fail at being a man. You were given a game designed to break you. This isn't just theory. This trap creates real victims. When you're told to be the mountain, solid, reliable, the foundation others build on, but in the same breath criticized for not being the river, flowing, expressive, always in emotional motion, you don't just feel confused, you feel betrayed. By who? By everyone and no one. By a world that hands you a script with impossible directions. The cost of this betrayal shows up in facts we all know but rarely connect. Men leading in suicide rates. Men giving up on friendships. Men feeling alone even when surrounded by people. Men falling into addictions that numb the pressure of perfect emotional performance. You've been taught that your feelings are both too much and not enough at the same time. But the deeper hurt is what this does to your inner world. The constant watching required to adjust your emotional expression based on shifting, impossible standards doesn't just wear you out. It disconnects you from yourself. You start to lose touch with what you actually feel because you're so busy figuring out how much of it is safe to show. When was the last time you expressed a feeling without first running it through the filter of, is this the right amount? When did you last respond without first measuring your response against an impossible standard? Drop a fire emoji if this cuts to your core. Who exactly are you performing for when you adjust your emotions to this impossible scale? And what parts of yourself have you sent away in the process? Pause for a moment. Let yourself feel the weight of that question. The ancient Stoics would barely recognize what we call Stoicism today. Unlike what many believe, Stoic philosophy never demanded pushing feelings down. It taught mastering feelings. There's a huge difference between the two. Pushing feelings down breaks you. Mastering them builds you. Seneca, one of Stoicism's greatest teachers, wrote a lot about anger, grief, and joy. Not to get rid of these feelings, but to understand their proper place. The wise man is not without passions, he wrote, but masters his passions. Marcus Aurelius kept a deeply emotional journal, writing about his struggles, fears, and moments of weakness. Hardly the actions of someone denying his emotional reality. What's happened is a basic misunderstanding that helps modern systems rather than modern men. True Stoicism was never about cutting off your emotions, but about emotional wisdom, knowing which emotions help your highest purpose and which ones distract from it. But there's another, even older tradition worth looking at. In almost every native culture, men went through rites of passage that included both sides. Times of intense emotional control and times of emotional release and expression. Native American vision quests, African tribal initiations, ancient Greek mysteries, all understood that male power needs both containment and expression. The modern man is dying from half-truths, packaged as wisdom. These cultures knew something we've forgotten. The male trap isn't actually a trap at all when properly understood. It's only in our broken modern world that these aspects seem to contradict each other. Think about how Japanese samurai culture embraced both strict discipline and the emotional depth of poetry. The warrior who couldn't feel deeply was seen as just as incomplete as one who couldn't control his feelings. The goal wasn't emotional cutting off, but emotional range. The ability to access both stillness and storm, depending on what the moment truly needed. Take another breath. Let this historical view sink in. This history reveals our modern problem's true nature. We're not suffering from contradictory expectations so much as from disconnection from a complete male tradition. We've been handed pieces of wisdom without the framework that makes them make sense. What if the question isn't how to navigate between being too stoic or not stoic enough? What if that entire way of thinking is what's destroying you? What if, instead, the real question is how to reclaim a complete male emotional intelligence that knows when each response serves your true purpose? You've been solving the wrong problem your entire life. This isn't just playing with words. This difference literally determines whether you'll spend your life trapped in an unwinnable game or standing in the power of a tradition that goes back to the beginning of human civilization. Let's name the hidden architect behind this impossible standard. I call it the validator, the outside force that has hijacked your emotional compass. The validator doesn't care about your real experience. It only cares about keeping systems of control. Sometimes it wears the face of traditional masculinity, demanding you man up and swallow your pain. Other times, it wears the mask of progressive ideals, pushing you to perform vulnerability in carefully prescribed ways. But it's always the same thing with the same purpose: to keep you looking outward for permission to feel what you feel. Every time you ask, "Is this the right amount of emotion?" you're talking to your jailer. Here's how the validator works in real time. You feel anger rising during a conflict at work. Right away, the validator presents two equally punishing options: express the anger and be labeled aggressive, threatening, or out of control, or push it down entirely and be seen as passive, weak, or lacking backbone. The validator makes sure that either choice carries a penalty. You experience grief after a loss. The validator offers another false choice: show no pain and be condemned as emotionally unavailable, or trapped in toxic masculinity. Show too much and be viewed as unstable or concerning. Again, there is no winning move. This is how the trap maintains itself: by constantly moving the goalposts of acceptable emotional expression while pretending there's a perfect middle path that, if you were just emotionally smart enough, you could find. You owe no explanation for your emotional reality. Let that sink in. You owe no explanation for your emotional reality. The breakthrough begins when you recognize that real emotional intelligence has nothing to do with meeting outside standards and everything to do with internal alignment. The question shifts from "how much emotion should I show?" to "what am I actually feeling, and what does this feeling want to teach me?" Think about how different cultures have recognized this wisdom. The Lakota concept of male emotional integrity wasn't about suppression or performance, but about matching, making sure that one's outer expression accurately reflected one's inner truth, whatever that truth might be. This isn't adjusting to outside standards, but aligning with internal reality. You owe no explanation for your emotional reality. When you begin living from this principle, something amazing happens. You stop experiencing emotions as problems to be solved or performances to be perfected. They become instead valuable information, inner guidance about what matters to you, what you value, what you need, and what you've experienced. Slow down. Take this in. This isn't a small change to how you live. This is freedom. This shift doesn't happen overnight. The validator has likely been with you since you were a boy, when you first learned that certain emotions earned approval while others brought rejection. Breaking free requires a basic reset of your relationship with your inner experience. Start with this radical act. For 1 week, practice noticing your emotions without immediately deciding what to do with them. Before you push them down or express them, simply witness them. I'm feeling anger. I'm experiencing sadness. There's anxiety here. No judgment, no immediate action plan, just recognition. Your emotions don't need management. They need witnessing. This practice sounds simple, but it directly challenges the validator's power. The validator can only control what you're trying to control. When you stop trying to manage how others see your emotions and simply experience them as they are, you step outside the game entirely. From this awareness comes the first real choice you may have had in years. Not how much emotion to show, but whether this particular emotion, in this particular setting, serves your highest purpose. Sometimes the wisest choice will be stillness and containment. Other times it will be full, unfiltered expression. The difference is that now The choice comes from inner wisdom rather than outside approval seeking. You owe no explanation for your emotional reality. This isn't permission to be careless with how your emotions affect others. Rather, it's recognition that genuine responsibility for your emotions can only come when you've stopped outsourcing your emotional authority to the validator. The trap resolves itself not through finding the mythical perfect balance, but through reclaiming your ownership over your internal landscape. And here's the insight that changes everything. When you stop performing your emotions for others' approval, you become capable of genuine connection for perhaps the first time. Real relationship isn't built on perfectly calibrated emotional displays, but on the courage to be seen as you actually are. Take a moment to imagine that freedom. Let your body feel what that would be like. Who would you be if you stepped outside this performance once and for all? This isn't a casual question. It strikes at the foundation of how you've built your identity. Because let's be honest, you've built significant parts of yourself around navigating this impossible standard. You've become skilled at gauging rooms, reading faces, adjusting your emotional thermostat to maintain approval. You've developed reflexes for knowing when to tighten your jaw versus when to soften your voice. You've become so good at the performance, you've forgotten it's not you. These adaptations aren't just behaviors you perform. They've become who you think you are. That's why simple advice to just be yourself emotionally misses the depth of this challenge. The truth is more confronting. Parts of what you consider yourself are actually elaborate defensive structures built to protect you from the consequences of authentic emotional existence. Who gets uncomfortable when you don't perfectly adjust your emotions? And more importantly, who benefits from keeping you trapped in this exhausting performance? Your fear of your own emotions was installed, not inherited. Look at the men you admire most deeply, not the ones you're told to admire or the ones who check all the cultural boxes of success. The ones who move something in your soul when you meet them. I bet they share one quality: emotional matching. Their outer expression matches their inner reality, whether that reality is fierce or gentle, passionate or reserved. They're not calculating the correct emotional response. They're living from a place of integrated truth. Now ask yourself, what would it cost you to live with that kind of matching? You might lose relationships built on your performance rather than your authenticity. You might face rejection from those who preferred your carefully managed emotional display. You might have to renegotiate every significant connection in your life. Pause. Feel the weight of what's at stake here. You owe no explanation for your emotional reality. But what might you gain? The deep relief of no longer maintaining multiple versions of yourself. The energy previously consumed by constant emotional calculation, now available for creative purpose. The depth of connection possible only when you're fully present rather than partially performing. You owe no explanation for your emotional reality. This is the soul-level choice before you. Continue perfecting the performance that keeps you acceptable, but exhausted and disconnected. Or risk the vulnerable path of emotional ownership that might alienate others, but will finally allow you to come home to yourself. When a man chooses emotional ownership, something primal shifts. He stops being defined by responses to him and starts being defined by his response to life itself. You owe no explanation for your emotional reality. The question isn't whether you can find the mythical perfect balance between stoicism and vulnerability. The question is whether you have the courage to break free from a game designed to keep you seeking outside validation rather than internal truth. Your emotions were never meant to be perfect. They were meant to be true. Who would you become if you stopped explaining yourself to the world and started listening to yourself instead? Remember the steering wheel, your knuckles white from gripping so hard? That pressure behind your eyes? That moment was never about finding the right amount of emotion to display. It was about reconnecting with the wisdom that your emotional reality is your own territory, not open to public vote, not subject to outside regulation. The wound isn't that you feel too much. The wound is that you were taught to doubt what you feel. The path forward isn't learning better emotional performance. It's unlearning the belief that your emotions need to be managed for others' comfort in the first place. When you reclaim this territory, everything shifts. The energy previously spent calculating acceptable responses becomes available for genuine connection. The mental space occupied by the validator gets reclaimed for your authentic purpose. The constant background worry of, "Am I doing this right?" dissolves into the clarity of, "This is my truth." This doesn't mean you'll never again consider context or consequence when expressing emotion. But it does mean the primary reference point becomes internal alignment rather than external approval. Sometimes this will look like classical stoicism, measured, deliberate, controlled. Other times it will look like raw vulnerability, open, expressive, unguarded. The difference is that both now emerge from ownership rather than submission to impossible standards. Take a breath. Feel the possibility of this freedom in your body. You may have started watching this video carrying the weight of contradiction. Be stoic, but not too stoic. Strong, but not threatening. Emotionally available, but never overwhelming. You can walk away understanding that the contradiction was never yours to resolve. It was a system of control disguised as helpful advice. A maze with no exit designed to keep you searching for solutions rather than claiming your freedom. The cage wasn't built to keep others out. It was built to keep you in. The real transformation isn't becoming better at navigating the maze. It's recognizing you can walk away from it entirely. This isn't about finding balance. It's about reclaiming ownership that will transform every relationship in your life, starting today. Comment below with, "I reclaim my emotional ownership." This isn't just words. It's a declaration that you're done performing, done explaining, done seeking validation for your internal reality. It's the first step toward genuine male integration that has nothing to do with others' expectations and everything to do with your authentic truth. This recognition of emotional ownership is just the beginning. There's an entire journey of male reclamation that follows. Territory we'll continue exploring on this channel. In our next video, we'll look at the specific practices that ancient traditions used to develop integrated male emotional wisdom. Techniques that have been buried under centuries of fragmented advice and impossible standards. You'll discover how to tell the difference between emotions that guide you toward purpose and those that distract you from it, without falling back into the trap of performance. Subscribe now and hit that notification bell to make sure you don't miss this critical next step. Because understanding the problem is powerful, but mastering the practical tools for emotional ownership will transform every relationship in your life. Starting with the relationship to yourself. This isn't about small adjustments to how you navigate the world. This is about fundamentally reclaiming your birthright as a man. The capacity for emotional wholeness that integrates strength and vulnerability, power and tenderness, boundary and connection. If this message hit you today, The journey we're starting together will completely redefine what male emotional intelligence means in your life. There's a silence that follows the moment a man stops explaining himself. Not the tense silence of suppression, but the powerful silence of ownership. In that space, something ancient wakes up. Our ancestors understood this territory. They built entire cultures around the integrated male, ceremonies, rituals, and initiations that honored both containment and expression as sacred male capacities. We've inherited pieces of their wisdom without the framework that made it whole. Tonight, as you move through your world, notice the moments when you start to calculate your emotional response. Notice the validator activating, pressuring you to perform. And in that moment, remember, the most revolutionary act available to the modern man is to simply feel what he feels without apology or exaggeration. Your emotions were never meant to be perfect. They were meant to be true. The question that will echo in your silence tonight isn't, "Am I showing the right amount of emotion?" but rather, "What becomes possible when I stop asking for permission to feel?"